Yeah, here we are. We are live. Welcome to the Second Chance Live series. I have a special guest with me, not with Will, with all of us, I guess,
With
today.
everybody.
And I am excited to share him with you. Um, Dr. Richard, I've been doing this thing where if someone says something that resonates with me that I can steal from my own speaking content, I ring the bell. And I told people that per our last podcast interview that for you, I'm going to ring the bell every time I understand something that you say
Oh my God.
because you're just incredibly brilliant. I want to encourage you guys that as I read his bio, if it sounds like he can help you, which he will, because he's a phenomenal expert on work-life balance. We're going to talk about that. He's developed an assessment that can really help a lot of people around the world. He is a voice for the nation, and he is a friend now, and appreciate him. And so we ask that you just click that share button. If you're on Facebook, you can actually host a watch party and share this information with other people because we really want to help as many people as possible with the content we share, with the way that we show up, and the light and the energy that we bring to the world. So I'm going to read his official bio, and then I'm going to tell you some personal things about him. And then I'm just going to stop talking so that you guys can hear from him, because I know you're probably tired of hearing from me today, because this is like your fifth time hearing from me. So really excited. Dr. Richard Shuster is a licensed clinical psychologist, a TEDx speaker, a CEO of Your Success Insights, which is a psychological assessment company, and the host of the Daily Helping with Dr. Richard Shuster. On his podcast, Dr. Shuster's guests educate and inspire listeners through their stories, expertise, and passion for helping make a difference in the lives of others. His mission is to make the world a better place, which he's already doing. He shows his growing movement strives to get 1 million people each day to commit acts of service. Can I tell you that as a friend, as a person who has been binge listening to the Daily Helping, the podcast that you host, man, you inspire me. And the more I listen, the more I'm like, I'm starting to ask the question, what can't you do? And the other thing that I love about Dr. Richard is that he's a family man and he prioritizes his family. And I told him on our podcast interview, which you guys will hear when it releases next week, I believe, that he makes me feel he convicted me and made me want to step it up as a parent and a husband. So thank you for making me a better man and a better husband, my friend. I'd love for you to share just some of your personal story because it's so powerful. Some of the things you've been through.
Well, first I want to say that what they're going to learn on the podcast is that you had a hand in souring the day before my wedding, and I'm still here. That 10 years plus later, I learned that you helped defeat my football team, which we were devastated about. So a testament to our friendship, to be sure. But I'm joking about that, of course. I'm so grateful to be here, grateful to be part of your stream. I know the work that you're doing is extraordinarily important to athletes, to the world. And your story is one that is so powerful that it is an honor for me to share that with my audience, because people need to hear it and people need to understand that there are second chances and we must make the most of them, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, man. You did a better job promoting my show than I do promoting
Ring
my
the bell,
own,
ring the bell. There you go.
Oh man, I'd love for you to share about the failure and I don't know if we want to use that word or the lesson that you had to learn from overworking and the impact it made on your health. It's such a powerful story. I think people deserve to hear it.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I would say I'm really on my third chance, because breaking one's back in a car accident has a way of disrupting your life. But I do want to talk more about that story that you alluded to, in that I very recently suffered a stroke. And if you're watching the live stream, you're seeing I'm here and I'm animated and I'm doing all the things that I usually do. I got really, really lucky. when I had my stroke, it happened at 2:30 in the morning. And it was one of those moments where I could not have fathomed a stroke could happen to me. I'm relatively young, not quite as young as Darryll, but I had no risk factors. I ate right, and I didn't drink or smoke, and I've never done drugs, and I worked out 7 days a week. How in the world could I have a stroke? It just doesn't make sense. And when the dust cleared and they sent me to a million specialists who poked and prodded at me, and they ruled out cancer, and they ruled out this, and they ruled out, it was stress because I was working too hard. Period. I was literally working myself to death. And as an entrepreneur, we beat our chests about how it's not really work if you love what you do. I loved what I did. I got to spend my days doing stuff like this all day. Would take time to have dinner with my wife and kids and do baths and story time and all that. But then I'm right back on the laptop when the kids are asleep. And I couldn't wait for the next Zoom call. I couldn't wait for the next collaborative opportunity or podcast recording, a media interview, whatever it was. I love it. And it almost killed me because I was working 70 hours a week. And if you don't like what you do, obviously that's an increased stressor than if you do. But you simply cannot burn the candle on both ends. And if you are listening to this and you are a business owner, say to yourself, how is it that I've gotten to where I am? Because I suspect that if you're an entrepreneur, or even if you're not, you've probably got more on your plate than you can manage. And what I've learned, because my life literally depended on it, is I needed to reduce my hours, because if I didn't, I would die. And while we get very romantic about how I'm doing this for my family and I'm doing this for my wife and I want to make the world a better place, because I certainly do, what good are we to our loved ones if we die because we work ourselves to death?
Yeah. It's so powerful, man. And, I'm going to use this as a time to tease our podcast episode, because we go deep into the story here, and it is graphic and it is inspiring, and it's going to help a lot of people. So consider this my cliffhanger to stay tuned for that episode when it releases next week. I'd love for you to talk about the daily helping and your commitment and your goal of getting people to do acts of kindness around the world using the hashtag daily. What is it?
My daily helping.
My daily helping. That's right. I was going to say daily helping, but it's my daily helping. Talk about why you're committed to that, and where did that concept come from?
That's a great question, and we did not talk about any of this in the podcast, so this is fresh new content. So what I didn't share is when I went back to graduate school and got my doctorate, my doctoral dissertation was on the impact that technology, such as social media and video games, has on personality functioning and the maladaptive aspects of personality functioning, which is the bad stuff. And so I have really learned over time that these things can be very problematic. And we are, as a society, very focused on, hey, look at me, and look how awesome I am, Instagram, and look how awesome I am, Facebook, and look how many likes I got. So we've become incredibly narcissistic as a society, and the data shows this, that there are tendencies of narcissistic personality disorder that are on the rise in Western society, and it's in large part due to the way social media is constructed. And I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, but what I will say regarding your question is, when I decided to do a podcast, because I was practicing as a psychologist, I had the privilege of working with families and kids that have been physically and sexually abused, and I was grateful for that opportunity. However, I wanted to cast a much wider net as far as impact goes, and how can I really create change at a global level? And so I thought of the idea for the podcast. But what I really did, to pull back the curtain a little bit, is that I snuck a little bit of neuroscience with that call to action, because you see, we are biologically predisposed as a species to. Hey, there we go.
I know what that means.
This is absolutely the greatest. To feel good, we're biologically predisposed to feel good when we help others. In fact, if any two people watching this live stream, if I was to pull any two people, let's say I pulled you and some random lucky listener, and I hooked up real-time diagnostic imaging to your brains. So Darryl's got this little thing on his brain, and somebody else watching this has that thing on his brain, and we can watch what parts of the brains light up. Now, let's say because you're a great guy and I love you, I gave you $1,000, because who doesn't want to give Darryll Stinson $1,000? I gave you $1,000. We're going to watch what parts of your brains light up. Well, let's say that other person who's got this thing hooked up to their head, they give somebody $1,000. Guess what? The exact same parts of the brains are lighting up. It's called the mesolimbic pathway. It's an ancient mammalian system. Come on, ring the bell. No. Ring the bell. It's an ancient mammalian system for
I can't
rewards.
lie on my own podcast, Dr. Richard.
But what this basically means is that we are hardwired to feel good when we help other people.
Know what hardwired means.
There we go. But we're so focused on this. So with hashtag My Daily Helping, I know that if I can, I was going to say habituate, but I'm going to say if I can get a person each and every day. So now you're challenging me to use different language.
Like it.
If I can get somebody each and every day to commit acts of kindness, I know that they're going to feel good. Mm-hmm. They're going to feel better. Mm-hmm. That hormones are going to be released that promote trust and well-being, and that's good for your immune system. And then if everybody's out there doing good things for somebody else, that's going to raise society up. That's going to make us all want to do more to help other people. And if we do that over a period of time, now it's going to become habit. Now it's automatic. Hey, well, what's my daily helping today, right? And so that was the basis for why I did that. And so I just, now listen, I'm not saying that everything about social media is evil. It allows my children who have very limited and restricted access, but allows them to communicate with their grandparents that are in different states, and that wouldn't happen necessarily otherwise in the same fashion. So I'm grateful for that. Mm-hmm. But we have to realize what these things are designed to do. They're designed to make money. They're designed similarly to cigarettes, that the way the system is designed is that you get a little hit of dopamine every time somebody likes one of your posts, and you feel good inside because that means how special you are. And so I really am trying to get people to understand that, move away. I'm not saying get off social media completely. I mean, it serves a purpose, but a family of 4 sitting around the dinner table and everybody's on their phones doing this, not good, right? And so I do encourage people to understand the boundaries, to put these boundaries in place so that they then have an opportunity to spend more meaningful time with each other.
Yeah, man, I love it. And I just want to pause and say, for all of you who are just now joining us, thank you. I am interviewing Dr. Richard, who's a licensed clinical psychologist, a TEDx speaker, and a phenomenal husband and a father on a mission to help people around the world perform acts of kindness using hashtag My Daily Helping. And I want to encourage you, if you have any questions throughout this time that you would love for him to answer, drop those in the chat. For those of you who are watching live, you have the added benefit of being able to ask a question live. I'll be sure that our team collects all those questions. Man, Dr. Richard has been featured on media outlets like Men's Health and NBC News and Reader's Digest, Cosmopolitan, like just Women's Health. I mean, you're everywhere, man. Like you're brilliant. And his TEDx talk is phenomenal, by the way. I finally had a chance to watch the entire talk, by the way, and amazing. I don't like when people have better TEDx talks than mine. It makes me insecure. I would love for you to share, what do you think has helped you to be successful in life?
I think that for me, when I stopped listening to what other people thought I should do and follow what I felt I should do,
Hmm.
and that evolved over time, and I kind of discovered it over time, but that was the thing for me, because when I launched that company, that IT consulting company back in the early 2000s, and then I broke my spine, and I eventually walked away from that, not wanting to do it anymore. I was immediately, and I talked about this in the TED Talk, I was immediately bombarded with everybody from family and friends who had all these ideas for me. Oh, you should go to medical school. You should go to law school. And maybe, like, everybody had a path for me because that's what they knew. And how many of us go through life based on the voice and the expectations of others?
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was an undergrad and I changed my major. I went into Michigan State University with a history major, believe it or
We
not.
forgive you for that.
Yeah, for that. Or for Michigan State,
We
whatever.
forgive you for Michigan State.
I see. Well, you're just bitter because that's the school you really wanted to go to. I think that's what that comes down to. But
I should have never gave you that ammunition. I forgot I told you that. That was so unwise on my bad.
But I remember, so I changed. Before I was a psych major, I was a history major because I was thinking law school, right? And, there's no real pre-law major. You just do whatever the heck you want. And so for a brief, like 6-week period, I was pre-med. And I remember being in the office of the administrator. You have to go through all these, for back then, forms. I'm sure now you just click a button, but changing my major from history to a pre-med track. And this guy was sitting next to me, and he literally looked like, he was the most miserable person I've ever seen in my life. And I said, "What are you doing? What are you doing here?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm same as you. I'm going to change my major and I'm going to be pre-med." And I said, "What makes you want to be pre-med?" And he said, "My dad told me I had to be a doctor." And he looked so defeated. And I thought the idea of being a doctor sounded cool, but I just, it's ironic now because, I am one, although not a physician, a psychologist, of course, but that really wasn't where my heart was at the time at all. And I went through 6 weeks of that, and I'm just like, and I think there was an organic chemistry course, and I took that, and I'm like, yeah, this is just not for me. But once back to my post-accident story, is as I was figuring it out, and again, I just had to just basically tell everybody, including those, and nobody was telling this to me, like, go do this, go do that, for any other reason that they cared about me, right? I mean, in their own way, each and every person who gave me that advice was, basing it off their own life experiences and wanted me to, I was at a pivotal point of transitioning into my life, and they wanted me to be more. They wanted me to do something better that they knew would be a good job and could provide, and this, that, and the other. But I just had to eventually tell all of them, like, look, I need to figure this out on my own. I need to sit with this. I need to figure it out on their own. That is terrifying. I was absolutely out of my mind terrified. I had no idea what I was going to do next. And a series of really interesting happenstance things allowed me to transition to what I'm doing now. But
are you trying to use different words right now?
I want to see to what degree I can push your threshold to where something will happen, and maybe the bell. This is kind of like Pavlovian training, right? I know you've got that bell, and so I want to see what happens. No, but in all seriousness, Darryll, it was really scary, and I think this is something I speak about on stage a lot, is because we have this little voice in our head that tells us we're not good enough, or we might share an idea with the people around us that are supposed to matter and do matter. And they might say, "Oh, that's nice, kiddo. That's sweet." Ranging from that to that idea is the stupidest thing I ever heard. That's never going to work. And so you need to get rid of those voices. And you could do it politely. You don't have to, draw a line in the sand and, send out some kind of a certified mail saying that I'm cutting you off and this relationship is over. But I do tell people, I walk people through an exercise on stage where I have them hold a pen and imagine it's a magic wand, and and you have the opportunity to just go boom and imagine what does your perfect life look like, and no qualifiers. Don't listen to those little voices. Don't think about for an instant about whether it's financially feasible or what your friends will think about you, or how will this interfere with your work obligations. Just be in a space of pure joy. And because once we really identify what's in alignment for us in terms of our mission and our values and those things that really make our hearts sing, those things that really get us excited, then we can work back and say, okay, now I've got this thing. How do I start incorporating more of that into my life? And it doesn't necessarily mean that you walk into your boss's office and pour gasoline on the desk and you're out of there. But it means that there are ways to be able to integrate that into your life. If that becomes a career for you, all the more better. But if you like working with animals and you're 35 and you've got a great job that you enjoy, that doesn't mean you quit and you go to vet school. It means maybe you find a couple days a month to volunteer for the Humane Society in your city, and you can scratch that itch in that respect. So it's really, though, about listening to that internal dialogue. And if you don't know what you're passionate about, you'd go through that little exercise I just did, because that's a really quick and simple way to get those juices flowing and start thinking about what would bring you more fulfillment.
I love it. I have several questions that I want to make sure we get to. One of those questions is, I think last time I looked at your website and your podcast, you were 176 episodes in. I know the number was above 170, and I'm curious as to what have you learned by interviewing some of the brightest minds on the planet, some of the most successful people on the planet. Like, what have you learned?
I'm so lucky is what I learned. I'm so grateful. And one of the things that's really funny is that I've experienced a lot of times when these guests come on to share their wisdom and their stories, I kind of feel like they're talking to me sometimes directly. And I'm taking notes like crazy because like, oh, that's really important. I think when you get to interview some of the most brilliant minds in business and wellness and influencers, it's an honor for me. And actually it's funny because when I first did it, I started the show with nothing. Like, it was just like I had a personal email address and I was just reaching out to people and saying, hey, come on. I would get up at 4:30 a.m. 7 days a week and I would email 100 people every day.
Oh, geez.
That was my hustle. I was. And most people said no every time if they replied at all. But a few people said yes. And I was so self-conscious when I first started doing this. And I asked Bob Burg, who is one of my favorite people in the world, and he wrote The Go-Giver, and it's a book everybody should read if they're in business. And I would always ask for feedback after the episode. And I said, Bob, how do you think that went? And how could I have done better? And he just looked at me and he said, Richard, listen to me. He said, I do this every day. I've done this for many years, and you have a gift. And if you keep doing this, you're going to change a lot of lives. And I just, the excitement around that, I like busted down the bedroom door. My wife was like in bed. I was like, Bob Burg loves me. And it was really a cool moment. But what's also happened from the podcast, and I think this is important too, going back to alignment with purpose, is that, when I created the show, certainly I wanted to build a platform so I could, inject some change where I felt change was needed in society. But I never thought, like, I never said, okay, well, it'd be really cool if I prevented suicide. That wasn't on my radar at all. And, then I I had a kid reach out to me the day after Thanksgiving in 2017, and I had never gotten fan mail before, and that's what I thought it was. So I ran and again got my wife. I think I got fan mail, but the email said, Dr. Richard, you changed my life, and I'm like, oh, well, maybe this is more serious. And I clicked, and he's telling me that he was 27 years old and worked in a country club as a dishwasher and was over his head in debt and was a high school dropout and was going to kill himself. He was done. And he literally had a loaded gun sitting right next to him on his desk. And he was on the laptop and was getting ready to write a suicide tweet.
Wow.
And for whatever reason, I happened to pop up in his Twitter feed just before he did it. And he clicked on the link and he heard me. This was John Lee Dumas's Entrepreneur on Fire, where I was a guest. And he clicked that link and he listened to my story about the car accident, which you viewed in the TED Talk. And he put the gun down. And then he went to thedailyhelping.com and he stayed up all night binge listening to episodes. And in this email he wrote me the next day, which I'm crying as I'm reading it, because once I realized the gravity of it, he said, because of you, I no longer want to die. Because of you, I want to start a podcast for people with mental illness so they know there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. And he gave me his number. He just left it in the email, and I stared at it for a while. And I didn't know what I would say to him, and I just decided to call. And he picks up, and I'm just kind of there, like he says hello, and I'm there, and I don't even know what to say. It's kind of like the 14-year-old kid who is about to ask the prettiest girl in the whole school to go to prom with him, and he has no shot, and he has no idea how to talk to this girl. And I just felt that I'm usually pretty good with the English language, and I had no idea. And I just somehow fumbled through. I can't tell you enough how much your courage has touched me, and thank you. And how can I support you? And he launched a podcast, and I went on it and helped him launch it, and now he's a coach.
Wow.
And he's doing, he's got a career, and he loves what he does. And so I didn't create the Daily Helping in any way to do any of that, but I share this story to illustrate that when we're in alignment with what we feel like we're supposed to be doing, there are going to be these unintended ripple effects, and we may never know them. That's obviously an extreme case. I would like to think that there are other ways that people have heard my guests and have taken action to improve their lives in some way. But you have to be in a space where you do what you love, because that's really what makes you most open to helping people in the most amazing of ways.
Yeah. I know that there's going to be some people that are like, I know what I want to do, but it just doesn't seem possible. And it seems too far fetched. And I know, you've got big dreams too. And we've shared some things privately that I mean, and I'm like, of course, yeah, let's do it and more, but there's people out there who have big dreams, but are just so afraid of failure and afraid to try and afraid of rejection. I'd love for you to just give them some advice on how to deal with that.
That's great. And I'm so glad that you asked that. Number one, as an example, 3.5 years ago, nobody on the planet knew who I was. Nobody. And now I'm in 150 countries every week. And so you will never know what you're capable of unless you try. So that's number one. Yay! All right. We haven't had one of those in a while. We were so due. We were due
because you're about to make me cry. That's why I can't ring the bell in the middle of you talking about this heartfelt story, man. Come on.
Number two, with fear. And fear in particular, it's very interesting. What we know about fear is that the reality of the situation is often far worse than whatever you're afraid of really is. And so there's a lot of techniques that can combat fear. And I know we're on a limited time, so I'll just name a couple. Number one, I love visualization. Not only is something I use personally, but I'm intimately familiar with the research of this. And so if you visualize yourself taking action and doing these things that you want to achieve, your mind has already rehearsed it. And so I know we had to bring athletics into this at some point. There's been some really interesting research where and I don't remember the school, that eludes me right now, but they took a basketball team, and it wasn't like the basketball team was like young Scottie Pippen and just phenomenal players. It was just two average high school teams. Team A spent 20 minutes before every game, eyes closed, visualizing themselves nailing free throws. Team B didn't. And in the real world, when they played games, the free throw rates for these players went up drastically. And so, I'm not talking about Larry Bird hitting, with a sweet, perfect stroke hitting these shots. Visualization is powerful because the mind, if you visualize it, and the more detail you use to visualize something, the mind cannot tell the difference between something that you visualize and something that's real. That's a huge thing to know. And so that's something that's very helpful in dealing with fear. That's one thing you could do, because if you've already rehearsed it in your mind, whatever it is, asking for a promotion, getting on your knee and proposing, whatever it is, if you've rehearsed it, that's going to help with fear. Number two is that a technique that I used to use clinically with patients, something from cognitive behavior therapy, is by exploring.
I know what that is.
He knows what it is. I love that. I love this. You're on fire. You're on fire, Darryll. So if in fact you make lists, so if there's a scenario and you ask yourself, what are the worst things that can happen if this fails? Truly the worst things that can happen. Are you going to die if you try following your dreams? Probably not, unless your dream is to have the world record for holding your breath at depth underwater or something like that. But in all seriousness, is it going to cost you your marriage? Are you going to die? Will you be physically? When you start breaking it down and being really specific about what's the worst thing that can happen, the reality is in most situations, it's not really that bad. And again, it's important for us to get out of our head in terms of what other people are going to say. Because a lot of times, particularly if you're in a dynamic, whether this is family or your peer group, whatever it is, if there's a lot of negative people in there, it's kind of like, there's an analogy I heard once about crab traps. And so, a crab might be climbing its way to the surface and other miserable crabs will pull it back down, right? You need to get away from those people. And it's cliche because almost at this point, I laugh. I almost want to ring a bell every time I hear somebody mention the Jim Rome quote, we're an average of the 5 people we spend the most amount of time with, right? But I want to talk a little bit about the neuroscience behind that. And we have these little guys in our brains called mirror neurons.
Okay. Yep. Know what that is.
Okay. He's here. This is awesome. So mirror neurons are why, if you are in a football stadium with 70,000 other people and your team scores a touchdown and the guy next to you is wearing the same hat as you are, 2 total strangers are going to do everything but make out. They're going to high five and hug and like, this is amazing. Versus take those 2 exact same people and put them on a subway train without paraphernalia for their favorite team, and they won't even make eye contact. And if they do, it's like that subway. I call the subway face, like the I'm constipated, can't do anything face. So mirror neurons are why. And what mirror neurons do is they basically help our brain find the familiar, what's homeostatic, what's comfortable for us.
Nope.
And that's what it's helping us do. So if your normal are people that hate their jobs and year after year are doing the same thing, or the meh people, right? Meh is the most dangerous word in the English language, right? It's just a lack of contention or contentment, I should say, and that people who are like that if you have 5 friends who are not going after what matters to them, if they don't know what they're passionate about, if they haven't kind of mapped out a roadmap to being fulfilled, and I don't just mean financially fulfilled, I mean fulfilled in general, those are 5 people you do not need in your lives, period. So if you're listening to this, start thinking about, I've purged my list of friends, and I didn't do it rudely. People, but I recognize that there were people in my life that were not a good influence in that sense. And I just very gently transitioned away from them. And now I only fill my life with people like you, like people who, when I say my goal is to help kids all over the planet who have been physically or sexually abused and do it till the end of time and do it for free, people like you are like, yes, how can I help? Versus people who, I've kind of transitioned out that are like, oh, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. If I had listened to that kind of thinking, I wouldn't have been able to create what I'm doing today. And so that is your peer group. Your peer group matters just about as much as the type of foods you put into your body and the type of care you get for yourself and sleep. It's critical. It's a critical component.
Yeah. I do want to transition into the athlete piece, but I ask people this question every time this subject comes up, and I'm always curious to hear the response, because when I first heard the Jim Rohn quote and about changing your network because it determines your net worth and all these things, like I remember being so frustrated hearing that, because I was like, what am I supposed to do? Just go up to rich people and just be like, will you be my friend? Like nobody wants to do that. Like, can you mentor me and then for free? And I didn't want to be that person, and it was frustrating to me. And so I always ask the question, like, what's your advice for people that want to change their network, but whether it's worthiness or whether it's just not knowing where to look, what would you say to them?
So what I would say is a couple of things. Number one is that you first need to know what makes your heart sing before you should even go down that path. So if you're still at this point of, I don't know what the heck to do with my life and I don't know what brings me passion and purpose, go back to step A and start figuring that out. Once you've figured it out, it gets easier, because now you can ask yourself, okay, so who's really successful in this space? And that doesn't necessarily mean a celebrity. It just could be somebody else in your community. And what an amazing time that we live in an era where you can get on the internet and there are a gazillion groups for any type of interest. Or there's programs, from a business standpoint, like Score, where you can find free mentorship. But the key is really, you can't go to somebody and say, hey, be my friend, or, I want to do this for me. Find out about them, find out what's important to them, and see ways that you could contribute. What I did from podcasting was I would, as I started getting more and more authors, is I would say, hey, you like what I'm doing for you? Would it be all right if I launched your episode the week your book's coming out? Who in their right mind that's an author would say, no, I would like you to release it, some other time, not around my launch window, right? But it's and that costs nothing, right? But it's a little thing you can do. Or if somebody's got something like, maybe they've got a local event in your community coming in, get involved, volunteer, give a few hours, or promote it on your own social media, or find ways to add value. Think about that first. We got to pull another kind of Zig Ziglar quote, right? To get what you want, you have to help people get what they want. And that's not selfish. That's not selfish, but to be genuinely interested, particularly if you think it's somebody who can mentor you to get you to where they are, then how do you give value? Because people are approachable. People love people that take excitement into them. The most significant word in the English language to most people is their own name. And so, by adding value for them, by saying, hey, how can I support you? That's how you get started. And it won't take long because once you start getting into that group, then you're going to get introduced and you're going to make new friends. And I mean, I have podcasters who have been doing this for many more years than I have that are in the stratosphere that I can consider my friends in terms of their notoriety. And you know how many times I've asked them for something? Never asked them for anything. Just trying to add value back to them. I may ask them eventually, if I genuinely need help with something. But who do you think is going to be likelier to help you when you need that? Somebody who's given their time and value for no reason other than to give their time and value, or just some random person off the street that says, hey, like you get this on LinkedIn all the time, right? Like these people will reach out with a canned thing and they're like, promote my blah, 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 whatever it is. No, like those are garbage. So you just, but again, to not to sound redundant, alignment with values and purpose is paramount.
So well said. Appreciate that. I'd love to transition into your passion for athletes and even just powers in general. What it can do for entrepreneurs and families and CEOs and just people around the world. Just share details about how people can access this powerful tool and why they should access it.
So I'll do this in two different ways because the athlete's tool is different. And while all of our tools that are in the Powers family of products do support peak performance and balance, the athlete tool is extremely unique in that, as a psychologist who's spent his entire world in assessments, and my whole team, that's the case as well, I know that what we have in terms of assessments in athletics, and you've taken it, so you could speak to this, is unlike anything that's out there on the market. And there are so many things that can tell you, we have phenomenal ways to measure somebody's performance on the field. How far can they throw a football? How fast can they dribble a ball or pass or pull up and shoot, or mechanics of how somebody swings a baseball bat? There's always been, in my estimation, a lacking of an instrument to really tap the other aspects of one's life as an athlete, about what's going on upstairs, about their ability to balance all the other things in their life, about their ability, how do they perceive themselves, where do they see themselves, how can they find out what type of coaching style would bring the best out of them. Conversely, what kind of coaching style would break them down and destroy them? Because those are both realities for players, and that's the difference between a player getting a scholarship to play at college or going to the next level and not. So, we've got all these things and supplements about how to help athletes get to the next level physically, and we're excited to offer something to athletes everywhere that takes a look at those other elements.
Love it. And where can people access this resource?
So that one you can get at powersathlete, all one word, .com. And we're very proud of that. We love that. And it's the feedback has been pretty much from everybody who's taken it, who's played professional sports or collegiate sports, is wow, holy cow. So we're very excited about that. The other one that you mentioned, Darryll, is our WorkLife Balance tool for working moms and dads. And if you've ever felt out of alignment, like you can't make sense of the work, you can't make sense, you're missing too many of your kids' games, or you're not having the adequate amount of time with your significant other, we created the Powers, and our fun, sexy tagline is Powers puts the balance back in work-life balance, because it's so important for you to be able to show up in the world and have those things checked off, right? Because there's a lot of assessments out there that tell your strengths, and that's important to us. We do focus on your strengths, but the analogy I love to use is if you jumped out of an airplane without a parachute it doesn't matter how your interpersonal skills are, right? Because you could be like, I'm doing awesome. You're not. You're gonna die. And so what's really cool about Powers is that we've gone through data and we have identified through an extensive review of literature and research what are the dimensions most prominently associated with success in life. Notice I didn't just say success in the workplace. I said, although that's part of it, I said success in life. So things like your relationship with your significant other, things like your diet and your exercise and your level of stress. And do you have passion and purpose about your job? And what we've done, we have 21 of these dimensions, and we've built empirically validated algorithms around this very thing.
Know what that is? I know what that is.
Yeah. So when you get this, a lot of people can be like, wow, like it's like a 35-page PDF of custom data that's just about you. And it will tell you how these things, these attributes that you possess affect things like parenting, like entrepreneurship, like ability to succeed and manage these challenges that you have. And so you could be, like Darryll, who's just going to read the first page, or you could be, one of these people who just wants to dig in and read it all. Like we summarize it very nicely for you. Yeah. But the thing about the Powers is that's your baseline, that's your foundation, that's your starting point. Because if you don't have that, none of these other things, it's kind of like a car, right? Like you could be bragging and really great about how you took your car and rotated your tires every so many, whatever 1,000 miles it's supposed to be. And I'm bad about that, obviously, because I don't know how many thousands of miles it's supposed to be. But what good is rotating your tires if you never change the oil, ever, right? And so whatever part of you is out of alignment is going to be the piece that is your weakest link. And one of the things that I'm also very proud of with our company and all of our tools is that unlike the assessment industry at large, which is basically designed to find out really terrible things about you so that somebody can put an insurance code attached to it, and it's just like this cycle. We believe that every challenge and obstacle that shows up in your assessment, whatever it is, can be addressed. And so we have, and what's really exciting is that, we're working on our app, which will be a companion app for this. I mean, it's great now, but the ability then to using more algorithms to actually be your accountability partner digitally and address those things that are challenges for you. So it's an honor to bring this technology to people. And we've seen the impact it can make. We've seen the impact it can make in people's relationships. And because it's very easy to get mad at somebody when they accuse you of you work too hard. Or, I mean, look at me, like, right? Like, I'm like the poster child for working too hard and almost killed me. But it's very easy to get defensive when your significant other says to you, this is what you're doing. It's quite another thing when a PDF that's been generated based on your specific responses to questions says that same information, because you either choose to get mad at yourself for clicking the mouse or doing that on your phone in a certain way, or you say, oh yeah, I guess I have not been taking my health seriously, right? And when it's in paper and it's based on science, there's just a different resonance to it.
Yep. Yeah. I think because you can't argue it, you have to face it, and it's not a personal opinion, or you don't have to. There's no way around it, because it's your answers, and the assessment has shown you what you answered according to. And so I wholeheartedly agree with you, man. I am looking and I'm like, dude, it's almost 50 minutes. I can talk to you all day. All day. You are full of wisdom. I'd love for you to just kind of walk us into some closing remarks. Man, I'm thinking I had subconscious like questions and things like that. And that's an area that I think I mentioned this to you, that it's new for me. being intentional about meditation and
Mm-hmm.
visualization, things like that. I've always been like a just wake up and go as hard as possible. Like it's just
Yep.
an athlete's mentality. But I'm learning that there's a better way. And,
Well, and
um,
I think with athletes too, like there's an element of machismo, right? Like, who's going to be the tough guy, and
yeah, yeah,
who,
yeah.
like we talked about in your own story, right? Like there was an element of that that led to your injury. And
Yep.
so, but I do think, I mean, I just interviewed 2 hours ago Mark Devine from SEAL Team Fit, and I mean, he meditates every day, and he's probably the toughest guy I've ever met in my entire life.
Most
So
macho ever.
yeah, like ever.
Yeah.
So I think, there's a lot of information that's out there now that roots these things in science. I mean, if you were to frame something in such a way that, if you did this, you'd be a better athlete on the field, and didn't call it meditation, but say,
Mm.
called it, mind body connection, or mind force 10, they made up some macho crazy sounding name. People would probably like buy into it, right? Because
Yeah.
it makes sense. So there's a lot there. Closing remarks. What can I say? I'm certainly grateful that you and I have met. I hope that when people hear your story in detail, the way you shared it on my podcast, and that episode is going to drop a week from today. So we go into dark crevices that, and I think you said that you'd never shared that with anyone publicly. So again, I want to applaud your courage and the work that you're doing, because it's so very important.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I appreciate you, my friend. I'm glad to have you in my corner, and I'm glad for the good that we're going to do in this world. And I'm glad for the assessment that we can make available to our athlete community as well.
Yeah.
It's a dream come true for me to be able to work with someone smarter than me who can help the same people that I know I'm commissioned to help. So so thankful for your presence today, your energy, your laughter. I think I did pretty good. I did better today on keeping with you than I did on the podcast. On the podcast, I just kept smiling, man. I was just like, yeah, but it sounds good, and you explain it so well. You do have a gift for teaching. So I agree with that. Thank you so much for your time today, guys. If you are just now tuning in, the good news is that you can go back to the beginning, catch all of the interesting content that we were able to share today. I ask that you still have the ability to shoot a hit the share button or host a watch party if you're on Facebook. Also, want to encourage you to stay tuned for all the amazing guests that we have lined up for you. People like Dr. Richard. Our next guest that our team put on the screen is Alan Lazaros, who's the host of Hyperconscious Podcast and co-host, excuse me. And he has he's great to talk about peak performance, and he's a very entertaining speaker. So you guys are going to enjoy him. But we've got so many amazing guests who have unique stories, unique expertise. They're superpower people like Dr. Richard. And so you can go over to secondchanceathletes.com and click the live button. And you'll be able to sign up to hear about all the speakers. You'll see graphics, you'll see replays. And so go ahead and head over there. And stay tuned for the book as it comes out. Can't wait to share that with you guys. I'm excited. It's hard for me, just to be truly transparent. It's hard for me to really stay focused here because I know that I have 20 more books that I'm commissioned to write. So I'm trying to stay focused on this one because I am proud of it, and I am excited to share my pain, my lessons, my light with you all. So stay tuned for that. Love you. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for sharing. Until next time, we will see you later.